Hello, welcome back to the Murakami Companion podcast, a show inspired by the works of Haruki Murakami, where we analyze his body of work in its entirety. Today we'll be talking about the middle point of the Rat trilogy and Murakami's second novel in his career. We're talking about, of course, Pinball 1973. Of course, spoilers ahead. Also, if you want additional context for this episode, you can listen to our previous episode about Hear the Wind Sing, the first book in this series. Pinball 1973 is a weird book, but a good one. It continues the adventures of our protagonists, the unnamed narrator and his friend, only known as the Rat. This is a couple of years after the events of Hear the Wind Sing, and we catch up with them separately. They do not cross paths in this book, sadly. If you recall, in Hear the Wind Sing, they go their separate ways. The narrator moves on with his life, and the Rat seems to be stuck in his 20s. Now, years later, the narrator owns a business with an associate, he has a secretary, he lives in an apartment with a pair of twin women, he seems to be doing well. But sometimes he feels nostalgic, sometimes he is ill, pointing that something is wrong with him. The Rat, on the other side, is in the same place as always. He's still a regular in Jay's bar. He has no job, no studies. He has a girl, but it isn't going anywhere really. He's stuck. So the book is a series of events, like a slice of life novel. And those events help them to move forward in life. Both of them. The narrator becomes obsessed with a model for a pinball machine that is called a spaceship. There was one in an arcade near his job, and there happens to be exactly the same model of pinball machine at Jay's bar in his hometown. The thing is that the arcade near his job closes, so he embarks on a quest to find another pinball machine like that, just because he kinda likes pinball. The Rat, on the other side, is deciding whenever he should or shouldn't leave his town to search for meaning in life. Is he running away? Who knows? Not even he is very sure about it. If you have read A Wild Sheep Chase, the sequel to this one, you know that it's really up for debate and interpretation if he really found something at the end of that path. Definitely he will know himself better by the time of the third book, and he seems to be happy with the turn of events. Not here in the second book. He leaves his hometown in a rather childish way. We are reminded that he comes from a wealthy family and he doesn't have much to worry about in his life. But he does care about Jay, the owner, of course, of Jay's bar, and he has a long final talk with him. As for the narrator, we follow the adventures of his life at the office and the life of these twins he's sleeping with. The twins are two unnamed girls that just crash in his house one day and stay there for a while. A long while. He's pretty successful at his job, so he can support them. So they just live there without telling him their names. As a Western reader, I was expecting this subplot to have some sort of dark twist, but no, they are actually just a pair of twins who crash one day in his house. He paid for everything, they slept with him, and one day they leave because they had to come back to where they came from. No explanation given. I feel that they are in the story just to imply that he is somehow blessed, but he doesn't appreciate the gifts that life gives him. And it might be true, but they also teach him how to be respectful to machines, almost as if they were human. There are these old useless parts of their house electric system that the twins convince the narrator to go to a swamp to have a funeral for. I swear this will be important later on. So, pinball. We learn that the rat has a good score in the pinball from Jay's bar, but the highest score belonged to the narrator, and the narrator loved pinball. He loved this machine so much, he goes to try and find a pinball machine just like that same spaceship model. Long story short, the narrator finds a university Spanish teacher that is obsessed with pinball to help him track a machine like that. There are only 3 like that in Japan. This Spanish teacher leads him in the middle of the night by taxi to a place in the outsides of Tokyo, a kinda rural area, and tells him to walk in a certain direction in the darkness until he finds a certain warehouse. The owner of the warehouse left the door open for him. So he goes there and there's a collection of over 70 pinball machines. He turns them on, he finds the spaceship model, but he doesn't play with it. Rather, he has a conversation with the machine, an imaginary conversation in his head with the voice he imagined the machine to have. This is an extension of the way the twins taught him to treat machines. This imaginary talk is to catch up with the machine, the pinball machine, and to say goodbye. The narrator is imagining saying goodbye to the machine, but actually he's saying goodbye to his old life. In the previous book, he just kinda lives that life. He just goes away. But he doesn't have like a proper goodbye in the way that the rat says goodbye to that lifestyle in this book. And that's it. The narrator just goes back to Tokyo and that's the end of it. Before that, we see the narrator go on a date with his assistant, who seems to be interested in him, but he doesn't pay her much attention. He has pinball, he has the twins he sleeps with, he has this really young, reckless life. After he says goodbye to the pinball machine, is when the twins say goodbye to him. It's almost like they leave because he's more mature and it's time to let him go. Maybe the twins leave because this duality that the narrator has, being juvenile and adult at the same time, feels resolved. And it's just time. The time is up. Narratively, Pinball 1973 feels like a bridge between Hear the Wind Sing and A Wild Sheep Chase, being closer to the former in the sense that there isn't much of a structure. There's no urgency, there's no danger, it ain't that kind of book. This is the story of 2 men, 2 old friends, who never meet in this book, learning to let go of things that should belong in the past. It's a very relaxed book. The rat has a sequence where he drinks too much beer, vomits, and feels he's starting to get too old to live this life of going to the bar all the time, every night. This is his epiphany, that he has to move on. And that is what the book is trying to tell us. In Hear the Wind Sing, the title means to pay attention to the signs, look at what you're doing, look at what your life is now, and if you haven't been able to close that chapter and say goodbye, that's fine, you can do it now. It's never too late, but do it. Do not stay in the past as the rat did. I think the title of the book has to do with the past. Pinball is like a kind of juvenile game that maybe is mostly played in like bars and places where young people go. And at the time of the release of this book, 1973 was already the past. If I had to review Pinball 1973, I will say this. It's hard to label. I enjoyed it greatly, as much as Hear the Wind Sing. This is not a book that you should read if you like action or if you like drama. It's not for everyone. It's not trying to make you hold on to your seats or cry or laugh. When I read it, it sent me back to those quiet days of my life, like the ones that the two protagonists are going through. Actually, let's talk about that, because life can be quite stressful. There's a genre in Japanese animation, anime, that is called slice of life anime. In those shows, we are shown characters and stories that are funny, quiet, relaxing. Everyone is out of danger, and generally the stories circle around friendships or romances, and you can be sure that the status quo will remain or will always change for the better. This is very close to that concept, but in book form. Stuff happens, but nothing dramatic, everyone is friendly, there are no enemies or bad guys, and the story concludes with they having learned something important. And our narrator just goes back home to read Kant and listen to the Beatles. If you feel your life is too boring and you need some action, this book might not be for you. Try 1QA4, Kafka on the Shore, Hardboiled Wonderland and the End of the World. That's where you will find what you're looking for. But if you want to read a book to relax and to be transported to a place and a time where people play pinball and make friends and maybe they try to learn something about life, then I do really recommend this one. You can get Pinball 1973 pretty much anywhere where good books are sold. Nowadays, it's really easy to find editions that include both Hear the Wind Sing and this one together. If you want to support this podcast or you just like cool t-shirts, coffee mugs or art prints, we got a few digital stores where you can find all of that and more, featuring the cover artwork for this episode, inspired of course by Pinball 1973. There will be one for each episode release of this podcast.